Welcome back to the Merxin Ltd podcast. Today for this episode, I have the pleasure of welcoming Merxin Ltd. A well-known figure in our industry in inhalation drug delivery. But still, Merxin, in case some people watching this don't know you, why don't you introduce yourself briefly?
Yes, thank you, Philippe. Thank you first for inviting me to be part of your podcast series. It's a fantastic initiative and I'm very pleased to be taking part of it. So as you said, I've been in the industry for many years. Actually, I came straight into inhaled drug delivery straight after university. And if you can believe it, that was in 1988.
Oh yes, it's catching up with me.
so it's been a number of years now working on inhaled drug delivery. And actually, I was lucky enough to land in what was 3M Healthcare at the time, Loughborough, okay. Which ended up becoming part of the Endeavour organisation in later years. But my first job was formulating PMDIs in CFCs, which rapidly became, within 6 months, formulating PMDIs in HFAs.
Yes.
So right at the start of my career, I was involved in that first transition from CFCs to HFAs.
It's happening again.
Yes, I know, it's amazing. And at the time, well, we'll come back to that as maybe part of the history of what was going on. But from there, I spent a good period of time at 3M, about 13 years, and then moved on to Ivax Pharmaceuticals. And worked on the sterile and inhaled product portfolio of both PMDIs, DPIs, and actually that's what got me into nebulizers as well. So the nebulizer solutions and looking at nebulizer technology was a big part of Ivax's portfolio. So a much broader sort of access to that. And
where was Ivax based again?
So, well, it was down in London at Docklands by the airport. There was the London R&D group. There was a group in Runcorn in the northwest for the sterile facility, and at Waterford in Ireland. So that was where all of the inhaled R&D was split between those three facilities. So it was an interesting time, fantastic learning experience from my point of view. Both from technical but from the commercial side as well. And then from there, I moved on to working for Vectura, and that's where I stayed for the best part of 20 years until the PMI acquisition. And I left the business and have set up a consultancy supporting people with inhaled product development, and that's been running for the last 4 years, which has been a fantastic journey.
Can you tell me a bit about your consultancy? It's very, very interesting. You are engaged in all sort of fabulous products. So what is your main focus, for instance, this year, let's say?
So really what we've been doing is helping support people with product development strategy, selecting devices or CDMO partners, and often for smaller companies who lack the in-house expertise on inhaled drug delivery and are looking for support to help them with their product concepts, develop them and commercialize them. So regulatory strategy, the best way of approaching that from a US and European point of view, finding those partners that can support the activities both in the US and in Europe and the UK, should we say, to place work, and then also the device selection process as well, which is so important for all of these products where somebody's coming with a lot of the clients I work with are startup companies who really don't know the intricacies of how different device technologies may match up against their product concept really at that stage. And so I've been helping them fine-tune their product concepts and find the right device technology that will help support their products and hopefully make it a successful development.
So you were at the first transition CFC to HFA. Now, of course, there is another one now, HFA to new HFAs. Are there any parallels you could draw, or any? What do you make of this second transition? Is it more efficient?
Yeah, I think
what's happening in your view?
It's so interesting seeing it played out for a second time, and certainly the conversation when HFAs were first being mooted and 134A was available, 227 was slightly behind, and there was a whole conversation about
Yes, there were already two propellants at the time, yeah,
and which
like
one
now.
should be used, and some pointing out even then part of that transition was, well, actually 227, that's got a very high global warming potential, and everybody's going, don't worry. It'll be many years before that becomes an issue. So it seems like the environment globally has accelerated that point to this. But those sort of discussions were happening in that first transition. And actually, I think from a soft mist inhaler point of view, that's where a lot of the initial work on soft mist inhalers came as an alternative to PMDIs, because at that stage in the CFC to HFA transition, it wasn't clear whether any of the HFA replacements would be acceptable in the pharmaceutical setting. So companies were looking at alternative ways of being able to replace the PMDI with something that's as convenient for patients to use and has obviously the same drug delivery characteristics. So there's a lot of work done on soft mist inhalers at that time.
Yes, that's very true, and we forget that actually the green alternative to PMDI is actually water.
Yeah.
So a soft mist inhaler is an extremely good transition. It was already discussed, as you said, 20, 30 years ago, and it's more relevant even today. And of course, during the first transition, that's where the DPIs, the dry powder inhalers, pop
really
up.
came to the form as well. Yeah.
Exactly, to replace the PMDIs. And now we have 3 types of inhalers rather than one that has taken over. It's quite interesting. We kept all the forms.
Yeah.
So that was your early career, this transition CFCs to HFAs. What other defining moments in inhalation drug delivery and in your career have happened in the last 30 years? Then
yes, yeah. I think
let's not list them all, but the one that's come to mind.
I think the more recently, I think in the recent history, was the process of getting a substitutable generic product available in the US, and being part of that, I suppose, international debate, trying to push the regulatory standards, or even establish the regulatory standards for particularly the more complex products like the combination DPIs, as well as the other products, that the PMDIs and the nebulizer products, and now the SMIs. But trying to work through that process, I think it was a very exciting time for the whole industry. It's setting standards that people are now applying to new product development, because that fundamental research around how the drugs are delivered into the lungs, and those questions that the FDA were asking about, well, how do we know things are equivalent here? You might have the same formulation and a device that looks as though it works the same, but how do you really prove that that drug deposition is the same across 2 products? And I think that being part of that process, the interactions with the regulatory authorities, I think the international effort across the pharmaceutical industry was really interesting. So I was a big part of IPAC-RS and ended up being the deputy chair of IPAC-RS. But that was a fantastic organisation for trying to pull, I think, a consensus from the industry side and involve the FDA in those discussions. And that was a real shout out for that organisation, I think, that really helped in that process. But so to be part of that, not just from developing the products, but helping to set the standards and understand the standards with the FDA, was a really fascinating process. And to get to the point where we actually had those approvals coming through, we weren't quite first in terms of Vectura, but being part of that and still seeing those products getting to the market was a great achievement. Having really, I've seen that from initial formulation all the way through to that to those approvals. That was personally a big achievement from my point of view in my career.
So I'm glad you mentioned it, because we forget that in inhalation drug delivery there was a limited number of new molecules coming up, and the way the industry has maintained itself is actually by creating the generics. And now, after all these maybe 10 years or maybe 12 years of generic development, we are now seeing the new molecules. So there's new impetus coming, and new ideas, and hopefully new approvals and products that will carry the future of inhalation drug delivery. So thank you for mentioning generics. That's obviously something that's kept us all alive.
Yes.
And extremely busy, and been able to develop new science.
Yeah.
In terms of science, is there anything you would say, oh, that really was seminal, or it was a defining publication or a defining concept and moment?
Yeah, well, I think I would go back to the HFA formulation work actually at 3M. So there's a number of patents that came out of that, and
Mhm.
I think we sort of see the scientific literature as being one place for information being shared, but actually patenting and the patenting process is very important. And so all of that work I was doing at 3M with a team there, we ended up patenting or quite a few HFA formulations, much to the upset of other companies that were working in the same space. But that led to, I think, a number of publications where we started to really get more involved with DDL, which was just starting at the time. So 3M, the group at 3M, really helped support the input into DDL, and had a number of posters and then talks published at DDL, which was really nice and sort of fulfilling as the end of the story of the patenting process. Because as you're involved with patenting, there's certain things you do which you can't talk about, and then it get to a point where you can talk about.
Mhm.
Um,
So again, you go back to the PMDI reformulation.
mm,
So we mentioned a moment ago that essentially now we have all the forms available. So
yes, yeah,
nabules, SMI, DPI, PMDIs. I'm not even going to mention nasal because it's also there, but it's a different part of the body. So
yeah.
let's just about. Um, out of those four, how would you recommend one of your clients who has no expertise in the field to choose? What they come in front of they want to
Mm,
develop a product for inhaled therapies,
yeah,
and they then have this array of devices and five categories of
yep,
product essentially.
yeah.
How do you guide them? What's your trick?
Yeah, that was a good question. Without giving any trade
No,
secrets,
no,
I
of
might
course
no,
not. I'm
no,
not paying for your fee, so.
but no, I think what we're seeing, I think, is quite a range of new product concepts which deal with very different diseases or different reasons for delivering drugs into the lungs, and I think that drives a certain view of what type of patient experience is needed to support the product. So, for example, I think for some indications where somebody needs a lot of drug being delivered or very frequently, actually that drives a certain view of the device technology that might support it. So it needs multi doses or short dosing times. Whereas something, if it's once a day or twice a day, that can clearly drive a different view of what the device is acceptable. So that view of how the patient is going to use a product, I think, is very important. And it's often not something that people have really put a lot of effort into. So a lot of the ideas come from I guess, a pharmacological, medical point of view of this is the best way to treat or get this drug into the body to treat a certain symptom or disease, and little is given to that patient interface.
Interesting you say little is given. Is that your experience?
Mm.
Then the patient experience, the patient need comes second
Yeah, I
at
think
the moment.
it's traditionally that's been the pharmaceutical industry has been led as much by the medical treatment, and I think it's a good coincidence that for some of the
Coincidence, yeah.
bigger asthma medications, the technology, because they're big indications, the technology has been able to be designed for those treatments. Whereas now, I think, and you're probably experiencing it a little bit, that for example, the SMIs are designed to be the same as or equivalent to a well-known product that's already on the market to
Mhm.
be able to match them as a generic. But that actually may not be the best format for somebody who wants to use that technology for a different drug that needs to be dosed more than once or twice a day.
And it's
Um,
interesting you mentioned the challenges because something I've observed is that biomolecules, some of them require very high dosing,
mm,
virtually impossible by inhalation drug
yeah,
delivery, even with a nebulizer,
mm,
assuming you sit with a nebulizer for an hour or at least 10 minutes, maybe half an hour, whatever.
yeah,
So um, I think that there is an inherent limitation because
mm,
for inhalation drug delivery, if the dose is very high. So the challenge is the current molecules. Where do you think the biggest challenge is? I've already mentioned high doses, and that's can be a problem, especially if they want tens of milligrams over one day over a short period of time.
Yeah.
What do you think are the other challenges? What have you seen?
Yeah, so I think you're right. There's the high level of drug loading. It's important. I think I'll still come back to the patient experience of frequent dosing for some symptomatic relief drives a view of the type of device. Maybe not technically about how much drug gets into the lung, but how easy is it for a patient to use it can drive the decisions. I think stability is still a big question for some of the molecules, certainly the biomolecules, and how you're going to keep the product stable for its shelf life or have a reasonable shelf life even. And I think that's sort of irrelevant.
Biomolecules, it's very true. Some of them are a bit fragile and they're frozen and all that.
And I think the loading of excipients, I think, also drives a certain view of how that will be received in the lung and also the stability side as well. So I think that new mix of excipients that's coming through is also how does that interact with the devices which haven't traditionally been used in these sort of devices is throwing up a few issues as well, I think, in terms of how the formulation interacts with the devices.
There is one category of molecule. Okay, I'm going to offer you another choice in case you can't answer my first question. Well, a therapy you're following. So either a category of molecule you're following or a therapy. Which one is it? So what is attracting your attention when you read the news in the scientific literature of the industry?
So I think there's a lot going on in severe lung diseases. So I would say IPF and PAH. So there's
Do you mind explaining the acronyms? Make sure.
Yeah. So idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis and also pulmonary arterial hypertension.
Sure.
Both very severe diseases, and certainly in the later stages, very debilitating for the sufferers. And so actually, there's a lot of treatments being looked at, not just for slowing progression of the diseases, but for symptomatic relief of those diseases. And some of the best ways to deal with that is via inhaled drug delivery. So there's and I think it's a trend as across, and certainly where Vectura started life was in that mission of trying to look for what we call 505(b)(2), but taking an existing drug that's used orally and seeing if a new indication or delivering it by the lung can produce a better therapeutic output or outcome compared to the tablets. So either there's less side effects because you don't need as much drug going in, or it's a more rapid response because you get it into the lungs and it's into the bloodstream quicker. And I think there's those sort of two sides to these stories. One is these severe diseases need better treatments. There's some new drugs coming through, and we can see that in bigger companies looking at that in this area now. But I think there's also a lot of smaller companies looking at how they can improve outcomes by inhaling currently available drugs. So that, as I say, 505(b)(2) refers to the regulations that the FDA have around repurposing drugs. So an existing drug not needing an NCE approval, but it still needs a full new drug application. And a lot of companies have tried and looked in that area, and I think the times are changing for inhaled drug delivery. I think this is where one of the opportunities really lies, because there's now the opportunity, I think, to challenge the FDA on how much of the long-term tox testing is needed. So currently, a new route of administration for a drug drives a very high burden from the FDA's viewpoint on demonstrating safety of local irritancy or local tox in the lung. So even if the drug's been on the market for many years, they'll still look for long-term animal studies on those drugs. I think the time is now coming where the FDA are looking at that and saying, is that really necessary now, and the view of what modern technology can do from a tox point of view in the in vitro testing or cells on a chip, and looking at how they can do it. So I think there's now a movement to try and challenge the FDA a bit more, and I think that opens the door a bit more to a lot more to how many of these product concepts for inhaled drug delivery could be commercially more feasible, because you're not carrying that cost.
So you mentioned as your focus of interest PIF and PAH. I'm always interested to know where. Sorry.
IPF.
IPF, sorry. Yeah. And I'm also very interested to know where the activity is in the world. So that has evolved over the last 30 years. There was a lot of activity in the UK. It's very quiet now.
Yep.
Then you move to Sweden. Sweden has a period of quietness. The US, it moves around. It's not always on the west or on the east coast. It's moving a little bit around. And then China appeared. Where do you think is this month the buzz of activity in the world, or maybe this year?
Yeah, it's interesting. I have to sort of base it maybe just on my personal experience of where I'm seeing inquiries and clients coming from.
Yes.
And across Pulmosan's client base, we've probably got 70%, 75% are US based. Okay. 1 UK and 2 European. So it's
and from the inquiries you receive, how much are repurposing or generic molecule, and how many are actually new molecule and new entities?
Yeah, well, I think there might be a bias because people are coming because of my experience of repurposing.
Yes,
so I do see the majority in repurposing, but I wouldn't say that those newer concepts aren't out there. Let's say it might be a bit biased from my viewpoint of how that split is, but there's a lot of activity in that repurposing side, I think, still. And I think this ability to think about challenging the FDA on those requirements is helping to open the doors a little bit to some of those ideas coming through.
In terms of scientific paper that you think was particularly interesting, let's not go back too much in time because it might have been superseded by new science. But in the last 10 years, is there a paper you think, I'm glad I read it, and it was seminal?
That is a hard one to pick on.
Yes.
I think there is some of the work that, and the best proponent of this I've come across is Andy Clark, but that view of how lung deposition is a probability game. It's, people look at NGIs and or APSD profiles, MMADs, and say, well, it's less than 5 or it's 3, therefore it's getting into the lungs and it's good. Whereas that view of, well, actually, there's still a chance a big particle can still make it into the lungs. It's just less likely. And so that view of how lung deposition is as much a probability game, and you can measure certain physical attributes of the aerosol, but it doesn't give you the final answer of how deposition occurs. And I think there's different groups have worked on this sort of lung imaging that have gone on, and Andy Clark, I think, did a lot of work originally around trying to put those sort of occupational health hygiene results into context of lung drug delivery as well. So that story, I think, of building how do you understand your product from a aerosol science point of view is fundamental, and I think there's a lot of work gone on in that area. And I think people like Mike Crosol and Dan Hardy and his group are sort of carrying the torch for it as well. So
new technology, yes.
Yeah.
So studying single particles, single droplets. Let me ask you a final question. So there are a lot of conferences around the world about inhalation drug delivery. Not that many, probably 20 or maybe a dozen or so. Which one is your favorite?
It has to be DDL.
Okay, very good. Why is that?
I think having been at the first one.
Okay, when was it? 1992.
Now you're asking.
Well, it was before that.
30. Was it 30 years year before, wasn't it? I think.
Oh, yes, of course, the birthdays. Yes, of course, that should be easy enough if you could remember that many birthdays they've celebrated.
Do the sums.
So DDL is your favorite?
Yes, I think it's such the structure of the whole thing is around inclusion and trying to get young scientists involved as much as possible. Having been in that journey of joining that or being part of that organization or that event as a young scientist and then following it through my career, I think it's absolutely that mix of science, exposure to suppliers, colleagues, making that network around the industry that everybody needs. I mean, one thing, I suppose, when we talked about achievements, but I think, the achievements, some of the achievements that I feel strongly about is actually the teams of people I've worked with. And you can't develop these products without a strong team of people around you. No single person has the expertise in every area that can really help these things. So that being able to get that exposure to those different types of skill sets and hear people talking about that's the sort of place where DDL really helps give that message and supports and makes it accessible, I think, across your seniority level or experience level in the industry.
So DDL being your favorite conference,
yep.
What was your highlight of DDL 25 then?
Well, it has to be 10 years of Merxin.
Of course, thank you. I was hoping you would say that. Okay, I'll give you another slice of cake.
But yeah, I think there's, I think a lot of the way that the committee's tried to sort of take a slightly different angle to that. How do we encourage innovation? Where does the money come from for the innovation? Not just about the science. I think that was a great session, and it starts to sort of put a spotlight on what we need to do as an industry. And one of the things I see and struggle with now as part of the consultancy, but on a day-to-day basis, is how do we free up money or get people, investors who've got the money to really see the value in the products that we want to develop. And it's an existing challenge. I think got at least 3 product concepts that are sat in a holding pattern because we can't find the investment money to really push those on, and it's frustrating at times because there's plenty of money around in the world of investments that could be used to really help these products, which are, I would say, very simple products to develop, but would have a real benefit to the patients. And
do you name a therapy an area, for instance?
I think the best way of describing would be symptomatic relief for different diseases, but using 2 of them particularly are around using the inhaled route as a route of drug delivery to get a very sharp blood level increase, so sharp PK spike to get a symptomatic relief of a disease and reduce the side effect profile. So that's where say the patient experience, patients would get some benefit from them. They would see the benefit, and I think it is sort of frustrating that we can't find a way of supporting them.
A lot of money goes into molecules at the moment. A lot of new molecules, because that's the drive for the industry.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Martin. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
It's a pleasure.
And we shall see you at DDL 26, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for having me.